Mom, starting with your next paycheck, we're going to transfer all your money to my account. Those words fell from my son's mouth like a stone shattering glass. I remember the clink of his coffee cup against the saucer, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. Everything in the room seemed painfully ordinary, except what he'd just said. For a moment, I could only stare at him. My son, the boy I had raised single-handedly, the boy for whom I had sacrificed sleep, comfort, and youth, was now speaking to me like a banker, not a child. His voice was steady, even cheerful, as though he were doing me a favor. "Why would you need to do that, Michael?" I finally asked. "It's just easier," he said, smiling in that calm, rehearsed way. "You won't have to worry about bills or scams. I'll handle everything for you." It wasn't his words that broke me. It was the tone, so confident, so certain that I would obey. I forced a small smile and said the only thing that came to mind. "If you think that's best, dear." He grinned wider, leaned down, and pressed a perfunctory kiss to my forehead. "You'll thank me later, Mom. It's for your own good." For your own good. Those 4 words echoed in my head long after he left. The house felt emptier than ever. The walls seemed to absorb the silence, as if even they pitied me. That night was Friday, our so-called family night. For 3 years, Michael and his wife Sarah had shown up like clockwork. They never called ahead, never asked if I felt up to company. They simply arrived, expecting dinner on the table, their favorite dishes steaming hot, plates set, napkins folded. I used to look forward to those evenings. But lately, I'd begun to realize something painful. They didn't come for me. They came for convenience. When I heard their SUV pull up that night, my heart felt like lead. The tires crunched against the driveway gravel, the front door opened with the key I'd given Michael, and then came Sarah's voice, a sharp, panicked scream. "Michael, where's everything?" I stayed seated at the table. My house was nearly empty now, no couch, no television, no coffee table. I had sold them all days earlier. Michael burst into the kitchen, his face pale, his breath short. "Mom, what happened here?" "I sold some things," I said softly. "Needed the cash. Thought if you were going to manage my money, I should have some myself." He blinked in disbelief, then color rose in his cheeks. "You did what? Without asking me? Are you losing it?" Sarah crossed her arms, her perfume sweet and suffocating. "Honestly, this is selfish. We come every week to spend time with you, and this is what we walk into." Selfish. The word cut through me. I wanted to scream, "You don't come to see me, you come to be served." But I kept quiet. Michael's voice grew harder. "You can't just make big decisions like this. Maybe you shouldn't be handling your finances alone." There it was. The final insult. My own son implying I was incapable, that I needed help. Help that meant handing over everything I owned. I rose slowly from my chair, the weight of all my years pressing on me, yet I stood tall. "There's no dinner tonight," I said calmly. "If you're hungry, you can stop somewhere on your way home." The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah's mouth twisted into a smirk. Michael stared at me as though he didn't recognize me. "Be careful, Mom," he said finally, his voice cold. "A woman your age, living alone, without family who really cares, could end up in a bad spot." Then they left, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the dishes. I sat back down. The kitchen clock ticked on, steady and heartless. And then, slowly, something inside me settled. It wasn't sadness anymore, it was clarity. 4 years I had lived for Michael, convinced that love meant sacrifice. I'd given up everything, sleep, rest, comfort, believing that if I poured enough love into him, he'd pour some back. But the truth was laid bare in front of me now. I wasn't his mother in his eyes. I was a resource. My mind drifted back through the years. Michael was born on a stormy night in Atlanta, thunder echoing across the hospital roof. His father held him once, then left 2 years later, saying he needed to find himself. I never looked for him. I didn't have time to grieve. I had a son to raise. My first job was as a receptionist in a small medical office. 9 hours a day for a modest paycheck that barely covered rent. When that wasn't enough, I cleaned offices at night. I'd drop Michael with a neighbor for babysitting, then scrub floors until 2 in the morning. 4 hours of sleep, then start again. I can still see him at 5 years old, asleep on the couch, waiting for me to come home. I'd kneel beside him, brush his hair from his forehead, whisper promises I was too tired to keep. When he was 12, he begged for a pair of expensive sneakers all the other kids had. I couldn't afford them. But I bought them anyway. 4 weeks I lived on canned soup, convincing myself hunger was just another word for love. When college came, he wanted a private university. Tuition was $20,000 a year, an impossible dream. But I walked into a bank, signed the loan papers, and smiled through the fear. It took me 12 years to pay that debt. He graduated, got a well-paying job, and for a while I thought I'd done it, that all the sacrifices meant something. But he didn't move out right away. Said he wanted to save. So I paid the bills while he stacked money in his account. When he finally left, it wasn't to rent, it was to buy a house outright. I was proud then. Foolishly proud. When he married Sarah, I sat at the back of the reception hall while her family filled the front. Michael said it was for business reasons. I smiled and clapped until my hands hurt. After the wedding, the visits grew sparse. Then came the Friday dinners, always with demands and never gratitude. I kept telling myself, at least he's here. At least I still have family. But family doesn't look at you like a burden. Family doesn't take and take until you have nothing left. That Thursday, when he asked for control of my money, something inside me shifted. At first, I thought it was fear. But sitting there that night in the bare quiet of my house, I realized what it really was. Awakening. I hadn't sold my furniture for cash. I'd sold it for proof. Proof that my instincts were right. That the son I loved so fiercely had turned into someone who saw me as property. I looked around my empty living room, light spilling through the window, dust glimmering in the air. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Michael thought he'd taken my power. But what he didn't know was that I was finally ready to take it back. That night, I made myself a promise. No more silent endurance. No more pleasing for crumbs of affection. The next move would be mine. And when I made it, I wouldn't raise my voice or shed a tear. I would simply stand, look him in the eye, and remind him who I truly was. A mother, yes. But also a woman who had survived storms far greater than the loss of a son's respect, and this time, I would survive for myself. I woke the next morning to the sound of birds. The same birds that had sung every morning for years, but somehow, they sounded different that day. Lighter. Freer. Maybe it was me who had changed. The sunlight spilled through the curtains, tracing soft gold lines across the bare floor. For the first time in a long while, there was no rush to cook, no worry about anyone's expectations. The silence that used to ache in my bones now felt like a warm blanket. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, just one. No extra cups for guests, who never truly came for me. I sat by the window and watched the world outside, the mailman walking his route, a young mother pushing her child in a stroller, a dog chasing after its shadow. Ordinary things. Yet I found myself smiling. Maybe loneliness isn't the absence of people, I thought. Maybe it's the absence of peace. I spent the next few days doing something I hadn't done in years. Living for myself. I cleaned the house, not because anyone would notice, but because I wanted to. I cooked small meals, simple but delicious, just for me. I even took out my old sewing kit, the one Michael had once mocked as a waste of time, and started stitching again. Each movement felt like reclaiming a tiny piece of myself. One afternoon, while sorting through a box of old letters and photographs, I found a yellowed envelope addressed to me. It was from my late husband, written just weeks before he left. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, in his uneven handwriting, were only a few lines. "You're stronger than you think, Evelyn. Life will test that strength again and again. But promise me, don't let anyone make you feel small. Not even those you love." I pressed the paper to my chest. Tears fell silently, not of sorrow, but of recognition. He had seen something in me all those years ago that I had forgotten existed. That night, I wrote a letter of my own, to Michael. I didn't scold or accuse. I simply told him the truth. How it felt to raise him alone, to sacrifice, to watch him grow, and to finally realize that love cannot survive where respect is gone. I told him that I was grateful for the years we shared, but that I was done being his convenience. Then I ended with one line. "I will always be your mother, Michael, but I can no longer be your shadow." I folded the letter neatly and placed it in an envelope, not to send, but to release. I burned it in the fireplace that same evening, watching the flames consume every word. Somehow, it felt like setting myself free. The next week, I made a decision. I sold the house, the same one I had lived in for 40 years. The walls held too many echoes of a woman who had forgotten herself. The real estate agent was kind, even hesitant when I told him my plan. "Are you sure you want to do this, Mrs. Thompson?" he asked. I smiled softly. "I'm not losing a home," I said. "I'm making room for a new life." The sale went through faster than I expected. I took only a few things with me: a framed picture of Michael as a little boy, my sewing kit, my late husband's letter, and a notebook. That was all. I rented a small cottage by the sea, a quiet place on the edge of Maine, where the waves spoke a language only the heart could understand. The first night I slept there, the sound of the tide outside my window felt like a lullaby. Every morning, I walked along the beach, barefoot, letting the cold water wash over my feet. The salt in the air stung my eyes, but it felt cleansing, like nature itself was reminding me, "You are still alive. You still belong to this world." I began volunteering at a small community library nearby. At first, I shelved books in silence, content just to be around stories. But soon, I started leading a weekly reading circle for seniors. They came with canes and tired eyes, yet when they spoke, their voices carried whole lifetimes. We shared stories of love lost, dreams delayed, and courage found too late, but never too little. One woman, Nora, told me, "You remind me of someone who's finally come home to herself." Her words stayed with me. One afternoon, while rearranging the donation shelf, a young man approached me. He was in his early 30s, polite, soft-spoken. He held out a book with trembling hands. "My mom used to love this author," he said quietly. "She passed away last year." There was something fragile in his voice, something Michael had lost long ago. I smiled gently. "Then maybe you should keep it," I told him. "Some things aren't meant to be given away." He blinked back tears, nodded, and thanked me. As he walked away, I realized, kindness had a way of coming back to you, even from strangers. Days turned into weeks. My hair grew grayer, my steps slower, but my heart lighter. I wrote in my notebook every evening, not to record pain, but gratitude. Gratitude for the sea, the laughter at the library, the smell of rain, the quiet freedom of choosing my own company. Then, one morning, an envelope arrived. It was from Michael. The handwriting was shaky, hesitant, so unlike the confident boy I had raised. Inside, a short note. "Mom, I don't know if you'll read this." I was angry. Maybe because I didn't want to face how much I'd failed you. I came by the house, it's empty now. I stood in the kitchen and realized you were gone. I don't blame you. I just hope you're safe, and I hope you're happy. For a long time, I just held the letter, my hands trembling, my heart torn between sorrow and forgiveness. Then I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not even a sad one, just a quiet, peaceful one. He had finally said the words I had waited a lifetime to hear. I don't blame you. I didn't write back. Some words don't need replies. They just need to be received. That evening, I stood on the beach as the sun dipped below the horizon. The sky burned in shades of gold and rose, and for the first time in decades, I felt completely, undeniably alive. I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who lived for others, who waited for love to be returned, who mistook silence for peace. I whispered a farewell to her. Then I spoke aloud to the waves, my voice trembling but sure. I forgive you, Michael. But most of all, I forgive myself, for waiting so long to choose me. The sea roared back like applause, the wind wrapping around me as if to say welcome home, and in that moment, I realized something profound. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the sound of your own breath in the quiet, the gentle rhythm of your heart reminding you, you made it. I was no longer Evelyn the mother, or Evelyn the caretaker. I was simply Evelyn. A woman reborn not through miracles, but through the quiet courage of letting go.